Merci à tout le monde, tout le support. Ils n'ont jamais cru en nous. Ils n'ont jamais cru en nous, man. Tu regardes partout, c'est écrit en anglais. Tu mettais le guide de TSN, c'est écrit Toronto contre Winnipeg. Tu venais ici, puis tu as parlé en anglais. Ils n'ont jamais cru en nous. Mais tu sais quoi, man? Gardez-le, votre anglais. Parce qu'on va rentrer le complot, puis on va ramener à Montréal. On va ramener au Québec.
Do you remember that moment from the Grey Cup, the post-game Grey Cup victory by the Montreal Alouettes? Marc-Antoine Decoy, take your English and shove it, basically, at the end of that. That moment is the jumping off point for a story that got my attention in the Wall Street Journal. Now, Vipal Monga is a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, the author of that story, which is entitled Quebec's Language Police Take Aim at Sneaky English Slang, and he's on the line. Vipal, welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Why'd you start off your piece with that moment from the Grey Cup? Why'd you think that was the good jumping off point for your piece?
Well, it was timely. It just happened about a week before I wrote the story. And I think it was really striking, the fact that he was so motivated by the language issue that, he basically said it drove him or his team to winning the Grey Cup. I thought was really telling, give a real sense of how important an issue this is for Quebecers.
And, I know you have a choice of a lot of stories you can do for the Wall Street Journal. I know you cover Canada for that incredible publication. When you're making those decisions there, what does the language situation in Quebec, what boxes does it check off where you say this is a story that people who read the Wall Street Journal want to know about?
Well, it's a very Canadian issue, so that I think it checks off that box. In a way, very quirky. Because there's no other place in the continent that has the issues that Quebec has in terms of language. And I think the implications are broader. We kind of took a light touch with it, but I think, this is a deep issue for the business, the minority communities here. It touches on immigration. So I think it reaches a lot of aspects of, life here. So it's a good thing to touch on, I think.
Yeah, and I know, you touch on a whole bunch of elements. One of them, of course, is, the creeping influence of English. I almost combined English and influence into a word. Influence. The creeping influence of English in the workplace, emails, using words like cool and that kind of thing. What kind of message do you think that sends in a story like yours, I don't know, to the business community at large? How do you think a story like yours resonates in places like Bay Street on Toronto or Wall Street?
Well, I think people are a little taken aback by how strong a stand the government is taking on this, particularly in this environment, where Quebec is trying to woo a lot of international companies to places like Bécancour for, the battery manufacturer and whatnot. And so I think people are a little confused and a little taken aback by how strong a stand it is, because it could have implications for the broader economy. I mean, at least that's the stand the business community is taking.
What surprised you the most while you were writing your article, researching your article, talking to various people? What surprised you the most?
Well, the thing that surprised me the most was to what lengths they're willing to go. I didn't know anything about the elevator music situation, which I found pretty hilarious. I guess most of your listeners are familiar, but the fact that, you have to listen, it has to be Quebecois music for it to be played on hold or in elevators in government buildings. I thought that was funny. I didn't know that Quebec is the only place that KFC goes by a different name. Even in France, they call it KFC.
That's very right, yeah.
Yeah, so those things were quite surprising to me. That Quebec is in many ways an outlier, even in the French language community globally.
And I took great interest. We start off with the top of your piece, but to me it was the end of your piece. That was really the thing that I'm like, okay, if I'm reading this and I'm a business person somewhere else and I'm reading this, the stuff on the hospitals and the healthcare and the signs that are put up in French only that say, if you speak English, we may give you service. Like, what about that aspect of things? Because I know you took a lighter angle on some of it, but that, when it comes to healthcare, not so light for the people here.
No, I do think that was a really telling moment. It shows that for all the government says about it being accommodating, it really isn't. At least in term right now, it isn't. They're taking a pretty hardline stance, and this will have an impact on people's real lives. So I don't think that should be made light of at all. People are, concerned about how this might affect access to really critical services like healthcare. It'll be interesting. And then the other thing that we didn't really touch on, but I think is important and has become more important in the past few days, is the university situation. McGill University is, I think, the 23rd best school, at least ranked in terms of computer science and a lot of skills that are really important for the growing economy. And if they're going to harm those kind of services, I think it'll be interesting to see what longer term impact that'll have on the Quebec economy.
In conversation with Vipal Monga, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, just penned a piece for that publication. Quebec's language police take aim at sneaky English slang. So, Vipal, let me get your take. Looking into the situation in Quebec, I'm sure you also heard from people saying, "Hey, the state of the French language it's in peril. It needs to be protected." At the end of the day, what's your take on the lengths the government is going to protect French?
Well, I mean, my personal take is kind of beside the point. I kind of try to leave that out of the way I report things. But I do think it's telling that the decline in French that they're referencing seems pretty minor. They said that, the proportion of people in Quebec whose main language at home was French has fallen to 77.5% in 2021, which is down from 79% in 2016. Doesn't seem like a huge decline, but the government uses that as a way to justify their policies. So to me, that was, a little telling that they're using even minute differences to push these policies. On the other hand, I am a little sympathetic to the argument that you don't want to ignore the issue because Quebec is a pretty unique jewel, if you will, of, French language in North America, which, could easily get swamped by American culture, by the English culture that surrounds it. And as, Premier Legault said, we don't want this to turn into like Louisiana, where French is kind of like not really existent anymore. So I do think there's some need to protect the language here.
Let's tie in together a few things here, because you brought up the McGill tuition hikes. I mean, the English universities that are going to have to charge more for out of province Quebec students. I know it's going to impact the English institutions more than the French institutions. You brought that up. You brought up the Quebec government trying to attract business for battery plants and more. How much do you think Quebec's heavy-handedness on language, whether it's tuition hikes or it's language legislation, how much do you think it's affecting business in Quebec?
Well, I'm not sure we've seen this. I think it's too early to tell how much it is affecting business at this point. But I do think that if the 70s and 80s are any indication of what heavy-handed language policy can do to the economy, it doesn't bode well, potentially. We are in a global competition for a lot of these skills or people that possess these skills. And I think just adding more friction to that entire process just makes things a lot harder for Quebec.
Vipal, I see journalists all the time try and cover Quebec from outside of the province. And I got to say, I think you did a terrific job out of Toronto covering a story in Quebec for an international worldwide audience. I want to thank you so much for coming on the program.
I appreciate that. I just want to note I'm also a child of Bill 101. I grew up in Montreal. I speak French because of Bill 101.
Get out of town. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Another segment here. Let's do 5 more minutes. Okay, I don't have 5 more minutes. Wait, hold on. So really, you grew up here?
Yeah. My family immigrated when I was 6 years old to Montreal.
Why did you leave? Why did you leave Quebec?
Well, my father basically had a hard time making money, so we moved to Toronto. I think it was one of those. He owned a lot of he owned some convenience stores, and then it was just hard given the business environment to make ends meet. So we left.
Vipal, let's stay in touch. Come back to the show another time. I'd really like that.
Great. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for reading.
Vipal Monga right there. He's a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. You can check out his recent piece, Quebec's Language Police Take Aim at Sneaky English Slang.